It's a real pleasure for us to have David Baker on the call today. He's found some time in his busy schedule, I believe, driving to drop his car off for repair. So thank you very much for joining us, David. But first of all, very, very many congratulations on the award of your Nobel Prize. That really is absolutely fantastically well deserved and a huge honor.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. And I apologize for the background noise from the car, but yeah, thank you. And it's great to be here.
Um, so I wonder if you could start by just telling us a little bit about how you found out. Did you get a call out of the blue and did you think someone was pranking you or were you expecting it? I guess no one expects a Nobel Prize.
Right, right. Well, I was asleep and the phone rang and actually it was my wife. My wife had it, and then uh, she answered and realized it was from Sweden and got very, very excited and started screaming. So then I tried to I tried to listen to them, and I couldn't quite understand what they were saying. But ultimately, the point was made and got across.
Oh, well, and fantastic. And then I guess you found it a bit difficult to go back to sleep after that.
Yes, it was. Then yeah, that's one thing. You don't really get much sleep afterwards because then I think it was 1:30 in the morning, and then from that point there are events and press conferences and interviews that you have to do. So it was a little bit of an exercise in sleep deprivation.
So does that happen immediately, straight after the phone call, all the press start get
Yeah,
wow.
right. Because they call you, and then I think it's just shortly afterwards. My I was a little foggy about exactly what happened that morning, but a little bit afterwards, then they make the official announcement, and then they so you have to be there for that, and then they do an interview, and then after that, then the press starts showing up at your house. So yeah, it's quite a production overall.
Wow.
And
And I
then
guess life will never be the same again now, right? I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but in this case, it's really real, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, actually, for me, I just decided I wasn't going to travel. That really my job is to be, focusing on mentoring all the students and postdocs in my lab and focusing on research in my lab. So I actually have pretty much an absolute no travel rule. I went to Stockholm, and I've gone to a couple things where I really didn't have a choice, but pretty much I'm in the lab every day like I used to, and everyone in the lab treats me just like the way they used to. I think I've gotten a little bit less excited about going outside the lab to give talks because there are lines of people wanting to take selfies, and I have discovered that there's one thing I really hate in life, and that is selfies. So with people I don't know. So I think I've been a little protected from what the distractions that often come with this.
well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, given all of that. I mean, this must be but the second greatest honor you've had since the Nobel Prize.
Oh, of course, yes.
So, Simon, you've got a couple of science questions I think you wanted to ask. We did speak to a couple of your group about the research already, David, but Simon's going to follow up with a couple more.
Great, great.
So I mean, I do molecular dynamics, so it's not completely in the same area, but not so far away. And I was just wondering if you could tell us some of your thoughts about protein design being done with robotics and a more automated sort of approach, and where you think that's going, and are we even close to that becoming a ubiquitous thing, you think?
Well, I think protein design is becoming more and more widely used. I mean, we've made all of our computational methods, which are all deep learning AI methods, they're freely available to the world, and lots of people are using them to design really exciting new proteins. And then testing, requires being able to test designs, you have to make synthetic genes that encode them because they're brand new, and then you have to make them in bacteria or some other way. And so it's there's so it's not trivial, but I think it is becoming more and more standard, and I think this will become the way to make things like binders in the relatively near future.
Yeah, because I guess once you've unlocked the rules of binding and the motifs and things, then I guess it's a little becomes, I'm not trying to trivialize it, but I guess it almost becomes a bit like Lego and putting things together.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the methods are working better and better, and you still have to experimentally test a few designs to get things that bind really tightly. But yeah, we keep improving the methods, and the accuracies get better, and the success rates get higher. Uh,
And,
so
and so in terms of the AI methods and the training data for that, do you see in the future sort of the sources of that training data diversifying, or do you think perhaps it would
yeah,
narrow?
I think that right now we're really using the protein structure data bank, which was the work of tens of thousands of people over 50 or 60 years who really dedicated their lives to solve structures. I think it would be, there aren't as good, really well curated sets of things like binding affinities, but as those are put together, those will be very useful too.
And so, are there particular classes of protein where your approach is going to be most effective in terms of designing,
Well, we've
designing a
made
binding?
binders now. We've made design binders against a really wide class of proteins like pathogens and toxins, like in this case, human cell surface proteins for cancer targeting and for autoimmunity. We've made binders even to inorganic minerals. These were very interested in templating inorganic mineral growth, like making new compounds sort of analogous but different from bone and tooth and shell. We've made binders to nanotubes, where there's really a very broad range of things we can make binders to. And recent work is really focused on catalysis, so making and designing proteins that make and break chemical bonds.
And are the proteins where this won't work that you're aware of, or should it work for all for any?
Well, it works pretty broadly. I mean, one of the other recent advances is to be able to design proteins that bind to disordered targets. So
Oh, wow.
disordered proteins and peptides we can now make binders to quite effectively.
Wow.
I guess perhaps RNA might still be a challenge, or do you think that's correct too?
Yeah, RNAs, we're working on RNA. It's definitely harder because there are fewer examples. We've made a lot of progress in sequence-specific DNA binding, and we have our first sort of hits on RNA binding, but we need to validate them better.
Okay, great. And I guess the sort of question perhaps you get asked this a lot is, what do you think is the next big challenge now then in this area?
Well, there are a lot of big challenges. One thing I'm very interested in is molecular machines, proteins uh, that consume a fuel and use that to cycle between conformations, which have which bind, which drives binding and unbinding, and so you can do work on the outside environment. For example, power movement. I'm also very excited about things like therapeutic proteases, which degrade their targets. So there's a lot of exciting new things on the horizon.
So I guess there you have to also integrate not just structure, but thermodynamics and kinetics too, right?
That's right. You have to model multiple different states.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. Can't wait to see your data on that.
Yeah.
I appreciate we're running out of time, David. You very kindly gave us 15 minutes, but anything else you'd like to ask?
So I'm just grateful that David's given us this time. It's been
Yeah.
really
Well, thanks. I'm sorry about the confusion. I'm actually at the mechanic now, so they're wondering why I'm still in the car.
Okay. Well,
But yeah, it was great to talk, and thanks for being flexible about the time.
and
oh, thank
very
you.
many congratulations once again. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hey, Syma, I've just been thinking about that amazing conversation that we've had about these new proteins that David Baker and his team have produced, and I just kind of was wondering a little bit about how the chemistry of how these proteins work. And I know that's your area of expertise, so I'm just sending you this video now, and I'm wondering whether you can answer that, because it's sort of something I've been pondering, and I suspect that a few of our listeners, may want a bit more detail on how proteins work. And honestly, I have no idea what the hell's going on with my hair. Maybe they could make a protein to like stop my hair sticking up all over the place. Anyway, see what you think, and if you can record an answer to that, that would be great.
Hi, folks. So we've just had heard from Tim, Susana, and David Baker, and their wonderful work on designing proteins. And just a few thoughts and words of explanation from me, really. So first of all, I think it came across to most of you that what they're doing is they're designing proteins that don't exist in nature. So we know that nature uses proteins as a workhorse to do many tasks. But what these guys are doing is they're designing using computers. They're designing proteins that don't exist in nature to carry out some function that they need. And in this particular case, the work that Susana did in collaboration with Tim was that they were designing proteins to neutralize the venom of snakes, obviously, which has got huge therapeutic value for humans. And then we were privileged enough to hear from David Baker himself. And I think what was really interesting was his vision for the future, whereby he was saying that it would be wonderful to, and his goal indeed is to design protein complexes and machinery that can use energy to do things. And I just wanted to explain for a second why that's so powerful. So, for example, if I was to roll a ball down a hill, that doesn't need any energy because getting to the bottom of the hill is energetically favorable. However, if I want to push a ball up a hill, I will require energy to do that because the ball wants to be at the bottom of the hill. So in the same way with proteins, if making a change to a protein is energetically favorable, a conformational change, then by and large that will happen by itself or very easily. However, if we want it to do something that requires it to go over a barrier or some energetic barrier or something that's difficult, we need to give it fuel. We need to give it some kind of energy. And really that's the next frontier for protein design is can we design proteins that we can then fuel? They take fuel and they keep going by themselves, or machineries. And they become like machines, like perhaps cogs that work together. And then the scope is absolutely vast in terms of what they can achieve. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And if you did like the episode, please subscribe using the links that we provide. Thanks very much and see you next week. Bye.